The early days. When I was young, the little white house over the garage up the long crushed stone driveway where I lived with my family was the center of my world. My sister was 15 when I was born. During the early years of my life, when she was in high school, she brought her friends home with her. They used to take me ice skating on the big pond across the driveway from our house. Ice skating was fun while I was skating, being pulled around the ice as a little girl by my sister and her friends, and being the center of attention. The things that I didn't like so much were that my ankles were weak, which meant they bent over as I skated. So they hurt, and I couldn't skate very well or fast. I fell down a lot. Maybe the worst thing in my memory about ice skating was when we went back into the house and my icy feet started to warm up. That's when the pain started. As I think about it now, it is still vivid as it seemed that my toes hurt all the way up to my knees. As I got a little older, I spent a lot of time alone playing in the sand pile that was near the front door of my house. In the comic pages of the newspaper, there were stories about imaginary little people called the teeny weenies. They were real to me, as I made houses for them and roads for them to drive on. I would landscape their houses with little stones and sticks and have hours of fun with them. Sometimes my Aunt Toddy would come to visit my mother and bring my cousin Ronnie with her. We both liked to play in the sandpile. He seemed to me to have better ideas for landscaping his houses and roads. Ronnie and I were almost the same age. I'm only about 2 months younger than he is. As Ronnie and I got older, we were allowed to play farther from the house, which is when we discovered the hayloft in the barn. We had lots of good times making forts with the bales of hay and jumping into piles of it. One day while we were rearranging some hay bales, Ronnie swung the hay hook down onto a bale of hay at the same time I reached my right hand. The curved hay hook dug into my hand between my pinky and ring finger. I'm sure I could see the bone for a while before the blood started. It was a very strange experience, since I don't remember it hurting at all. For a long time I used to look at that scar to be sure which was right and which was left. Now that seems pretty strange. I would think I should have known my left from my right by that age. Somewhere around 11, I think. Ronnie's and my next fun thing to do was to climb one of the pine trees near my house, and to go high enough that the tree would bend toward another tree. Then we would swing to the next tree and have a great time swinging from pine tree to pine tree. It sure was fun, until we got home and got in trouble for all the pine pitch that was on us and our clothes. Sometime in my preteen years, I tied a towel around my neck like a cape and jumped off the greenhouse like Superman would. I didn't fly, just landed unhurt but embarrassed on the ground. The place where I grew up was a wholesale tree nursery, and my father was the foreman. I used to go with him to the greenhouse sometimes and watch as he put little pieces of trees called cuttings into boxes of sand. First, he would dip the cutting into water, then into white powder that helped make the roots grow. And then he would stick them into the sand in straight rows. After these cuttings grew good root systems, they would be transplanted into bigger flats. Then they would be planted out in the fields when they got to be about a foot tall. When these shrubs got big enough, they would be sold to retail stores or smaller wholesale nurseries. The man who owned the nursery was a New York City doctor, so he spent most weekdays away from Pleasant Valley. His wife had red hair, held herself stiffly, and most of the time it seemed to me she carried around a mixed drink. I remember my mother calling it a Tom Collins. Dr. and Mrs. Rawls had 2 children, a boy named Bryant, who was near my age, and a girl named Janet, who was a couple of years older. Their house was the largest house I had ever seen. To add to the size of the house, there was an addition on the end they called the West Wing, which was made up of 6 or 8 bedrooms, with a hallway down the middle. They had a black butler and cook named William to help take care of the house and prepare food for the large parties they occasionally had. Sometimes Bryant and Janet would let me play with them, but mostly I was ignored by them. The driveway in front of our house seemed very long when I was young. I used to have to walk down it all alone to get the school bus. But after I was grown and went back to see it again, it wasn't very long at all. The driveway was covered with crushed stones that were about 1 inch around and had very rough, pointy edges. It seemed to be very important to me that I could run down the driveway barefoot. I always wanted to be like a superhero, and since flying off the greenhouse didn't work, running on crushed stone was the closest I could come to a superpower.